All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all are having a good week, surviving, and are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The purpose of this video is pretty straightforward and pretty simple, so it's not going to be a lot of new information. But in general, I just want to make sure everyone is comfortable with MLA format and with putting together a works cited page, which is a big part of this assignment of kind of synthesizing and gathering research. And while we won't have a whole lot of time in this course to practice citations and putting together works cited pages, formatting, that kind of thing, these skills will be covered in CO 150. So the purpose of this is just to kind of form a baseline for you so that when you move into those other classes, CO 150, other writing courses, other writing and research contexts, you have a little bit of this groundwork to kind of start you off. So one thing that I want to say before we get going is that these citations and these rules, they're not necessarily hard or difficult as much as they require you to pay close attention to detail, right? So it's going to be important more than anything that you're just paying really close attention to the small details. Now, citations in general can get really frustrating because there are a lot of really tedious details that can oftentimes feel overwhelming. And what I'm hoping is by pointing you to like specific resources, this won't feel overwhelming in this context. But as you move out into other research classes and research contexts, it does sometimes become a little bit confusing and overwhelming. But it's important to remember, number one, that the resources are there. They're available. You always have the resources to do this. And the second thing is that when you're writing in an academic context, you might not like all of the rules. It might not make sense to you completely, but these are the conventions of this genre, right? So if you want to be successful within an academic writing context in college as a college writer, it's really important that you pay attention to these conventions. The last thing that I want to say that I think is really important is that failing to pay attention to these can get you into a lot of trouble later down the road when you're no longer learning these as much as expected to use them. So again, the university doesn't make a distinction between unintentional and intentional plagiarism. And in your higher level classes, if you're not citing consistently and or citing correctly, you can get it can not only affect your grade, but you can actually get into a lot of trouble. So just kind of keeping that in mind as we're running through these, that this isn't just an arbitrary thing. This can actually have an impact on grades and on you. So I want to start by just reminding you of the context that you're working within, and that is related to the synthesis grid, which is due Monday, May 11th at midnight. And I know that you saw a video where I went through all of these instructions, but if you haven't reminded yourself recently what is required in this assignment, I would really recommend going back and just doing a quick check to make sure you're actually doing what it is you need to do for this. So again, you're gathering sources that are related to a particular problem or issue. And you have an inquiry question that is driving this. However, when you are gathering your sources, you also want to be thinking about the ways in which your sources are in some way answering these sub-questions that surround your problem, right? So answering the question of what the problem actually is, right? Do you have some research that just talks about what the situation is? Do you have research that shows why this is an urgent and important issue? Do you have research that suggests potential solutions? And this is something that was touched on or was kind of broken down in the initial video about this assignment. So this shouldn't be new information. So you want to have a wide range of sources that address different things relating to your problem and question. The other thing you want to make sure of is that you have a scholarly source that is longer than 5 pages, and that you're absolutely sure that it's a scholarly source, because that's a big piece of this, right? Part of what I'm assessing you on is your ability to know that difference. So make sure that one of your sources is scholarly, and also that your sources ultimately represent a total of 3 stakeholders. And by represent, it doesn't mean it has to be the author. It doesn't mean that it's like, about that particular stakeholder only. It's probably going to represent or talk about several different stakeholders. All I'm asking for is an awareness of at least 3 across all 5 sources, and I don't think that should be difficult to come by at all. Okay, so that is in general what I'm going to be looking for when I'm looking at your actual research. In addition, you are going to want to have a properly formatted works cited page, which reflects the 5 sources you record on your grid. And so that's what we're going to talk about in just a minute here. The other thing that I wanted to do is take us to the synthesis grid. And this is just a reminder that this is the template that you want to be working with. All of this is and was posted on Canvas, but I've kind of created a new module that is just a reminder of where those resources are. So it should say under this week, resources for synthesis grid. So you have the assignment sheet and you also have this, and this is what you are filling out. Again, you want to make sure you're writing in complete sentences. The only thing that maybe doesn't need to be in complete sentences is obviously the title and the stakeholders that are represented. You can just kind of name those. And then all of this, along with your works cited page, is due by Monday, the 11th at midnight. All of this up until this point should be a review. So I've taken you kind of through what has already been talked about, and now I just want to spend a little bit of time on resources to help you with the works cited page. If you go to Canvas, you will see in modules that I've listed any resources that you are going to need or could need for this next week or so. And you're probably going to have to scroll down because I have quite a few resources for revision, and these are all documents that I have already posted or that we've already looked at in class for A1 and or A2. None of these should be new, right? These are things that you've already looked at, but they are here at the top for you to revisit. So scroll down past that, because what you're going to really want to be paying attention to as you're working on your synthesis grid are the materials that are posted in week 15, which is right under resources for revision. And you'll see that you have materials for synthesis grid, your assignment sheet that we just went over, the synthesis grid itself, and now a couple of other resources here. And the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is the Purdue OWL. And this link will take you directly to electronic sources in MLA. So generally when you go to kind of the general OWL website, it's going to look a little bit different. If you were just to go to the Purdue OWL, this is what you would see, and you would need to go to MLA Guide, because in CO150 and CO130 we work with MLA, though it does have other citation models. And then you would need to go to Formatting and Style Guide, and then to electronic sources. And the reason why I'm taking you through all of this is generally, OWL is considered the more credible, the most credible place to go to for your citations. And a lot of times I have students who just give up because they can't find what it is that they're looking for. So in Canvas, I have the link that should take you right to electronic sources. One of the questions that I often get has to do with whether or not you can use citation generators. You are more than welcome to use a citation generator to start to put together your source, but I would highly recommend that you double check it against the OWL, because more often than not, the citation generators will generate some pieces, but they won't have all of the correct information in there in the correct formatting. So it's going to be really important that if you do decide to use a generator, that you check it against OWL. There is a citation generator right here on OWL, the citation machine. This is not going to the OWL website. So just because you're running your source, this is an ad, so just because you're running your URL through this doesn't mean that you're actually going to OWL. What you are going to need to do when you click on electronic sources is actually find the source that you are using. More often than not, this is going to be in electronic sources, an article in a web magazine, an article in an online scholarly journal, or more likely an article from an online database. I think also, let's see, a page on a website. So these are the most common citation formats, and you especially with this particular assignment, you probably aren't going to be using anything outside of the four that I just mentioned. If for some reason you are, you can go up here, and there are some other options like books, other kinds of sources, periodicals, that sort of thing. So more so for future reference, you have lots of different formats that you can look at. So once you have an idea of what kind of source you are citing, you want to make sure you follow it exactly. This is what I mean when I say that this isn't difficult, but it does require attention to detail. So you want to follow a similar pattern with punctuation. You want to pay attention to capitalization. You want to pay attention to what is italicized, what is in quotations, and the ordering of this information, right? So at the top, you have a description of the different information you need to include, but more importantly, you have kind of a model that you can follow. And what I have always done that I've found to be really helpful is what I'll do is if I know I have, a lot of sources that look a certain way, I will copy and paste from the OWL website. Then I'll paste the format onto my Works Cited page just so I can kind of see and remind myself what the different pieces of information I have to have are, right? So with a scholarly source, you're going to usually need the most information. I have last name, first name, title of article in quotations. I have the journal title in italics. I have volume number, and I can just kind of follow along and make sure I have all of the pieces in my actual citation. And I think that's the easiest way to do it, as opposed to kind of going back and forth between the two. So that is ultimately how to create those citations, which is what you'll need to do for Monday. And the final thing that you'll also need to do, which really shouldn't take a whole lot of your time, but you do want to pay attention to, is you want to make sure you're formatting the Works Cited page correctly. And this is an instance where I am going to pay attention to formatting. Luckily, I have posted on Canvas not only a correctly formatted Works Cited page, but it's also annotated with comments. So if you download the document, you can see comments in the margin which point you to what some of the formatting requirements. So title is Works Cited centered. Each entry begins with a hanging indentation. This is something that some people have a little bit of trouble with, but there are a ton of YouTube videos out there that show you how to create this hanging indentation on a PC, on a Mac, etc. And I'll post a link to this as well. Citations follow the MLA guidelines from OWL. Everything is double spaced. They are in alphabetical order, 8-inch margins, and Times New Roman fonts, 12 points. So the two things I'm going to be looking for here are whether or not your citations are correct and whether or not your Works Cited page is correctly formatted. Now, as you move into future writing classes, CO 150 conventions and rules will certainly be covered.
However, having a general sense of how to put together a works cited page and use the OWL website is going to benefit you in a lot of different writing contexts.